When I was approximately 9 years old, our school took us on a trip to see Newgrange and the Boyne Valley, Tara, and it was the first time I saw these places. It was the first time I was in the passage at Newgrange, and the experience changed my life forever. However, that day was finished with a trip to a cathedral in a city called Drogheda, which is about 50 miles north of Dublin, 40 or 50 miles north of Dublin. And in the cathedral they have in a glass box the head of a Catholic martyr who's now a saint called Oliver Plunkett. He had his head chopped off and, defending Catholicism and so on, and he's considered a great hero by Irish Catholics and by Catholics around the world actually. And naturally it traumatized us at 9 years old. Your psychology and your cognition can't handle something like that, and it messed us up. And the next day in school, all the teacher wanted to talk about was this great saint whose head was in a box now for hundreds of years. Now this brings us to the difference between ancestor worship and death cults. You'll see around the world, particularly, almost exclusively within Catholicism, you'll see churches in Portugal and Bohemia which are decorated in bones. You will see the Mexican Day of the Dead and other such festivals in Sicily and other places in other Catholic countries. And people think that these are morbid affairs. And that's only because we have lost our connection with death and the cycle of life. Remember, in the pagan system, you don't have a beginning and an end. We don't have that biblical system of, do as you're told or you won't be destroyed at the end of the world. The pagan system is based on a secular idea that everything restores itself and comes back. Just as the seasons, this is why we venerate, or we have symbolism such as the swastika, which is in Ireland is the St. Bridget's cross, or the Celtic cross. Now, our ancestors, going right back to the Neolithic, death was quite different. When somebody died, their body was placed upon what is known as an excarnation table. And this was a rack that was placed on 4 or 6 legs, about 10 feet off the ground, on poles, on wooden poles. And the body was left there to decay and be eaten by ravens and jackdaws and crows. And this is where the idea of the Valkyrie comes from. The idea of the corpse being taken up, the spirit being taken from the corpse up to heaven by the crows and the ravens. And that's where that idea came from. The symbolic death mother, the Morrigan, the Babe, and so on. The Dhumahavati, I believe it's called in Hinduism, which is very similar, which is the Indo-European paganism is very, very similar. It's just the regional variations are different. Now the bones were then taken down, minus the finger bones and the toe bones, because the ravens or the crows would have been able to carry them off. They would be cleaned ritualistically and placed in earthenware jars and then put inside the chambers. And at certain times of the year, probably in this part of the world, although it's only speculation, I can't completely confirm it, it probably would have been Halloween, Samhain, what we call All Saints' Day, October 30th to November 1st, where people would go into the chambers and retrieve the ancestors' bones and keep their memory alive, keep their good deeds alive, the stories alive. The start of the summer, Beltane, or Valpurgis, women would go in and give birth. Pregnant women would give birth, or there would be sexual conception inside these these mounds, and the ancestor would be reborn again. The new child would be Uncle Frank or your grandmother. Well, it wouldn't be Frank, but it would be Uncle so-and-so, your grandmother, and you have your sister who died, and they were reincarnated. So it was a proactive reincarnation rather than a kind of a conditional one like the Hindus have, you have in the Vedic world, or the Tibetans. It was you could actually reincarnate your ancestors by keeping their memories alive, and your children born would be them reborn into the soul, the spirit and the soul. And this is very much central to the pagan, the Saxon, Germanic tribes, Celtiberians, and so on. Now so that gave you control of life. You could actually bring back the ancestors, and this is what's important with my book, The Druid Code. See the link below. Is that I talk about we must go to these places, these ancient sites, these ancient hills, these ancient rocks, these ancient megaliths, and venerate the people who built them, remember them, feel for them, embrace their existence, and so on. And that way we will reborn these people who were probably snuffed out by Christianity. Now, Christianity takes a very different approach to all this. What Christianity does is it takes only the relics, the finger bones, and they preserve the flesh as well as the bone. And this would have been a sacrilege to our ancestors. And remember, Catholicism is basically paganism rebranded. And you would worship the dead body. You would worship the saint. You would worship the relic, and so on like that. But that was a death cult, because you were not bringing that person back, and you were not sanctifying creation of the new generation based upon it. You were merely worshipping the dead head in the box, the bit of a finger, the heart or the bone of a saint, the rotting flesh, because ultimately Christianity is based on the veneration of a putrefied corpse nailed to a plank in the Middle East. That's a death cult. Now, why is that wrong, and what the pagans did correct? Well, firstly, their flesh was not rotted into the earth. It was given back to nature. It was given back to animals. It fed and sustained the animals of the world. Another thing that went on as well is that the memory was brought back to life by the veneration of the bones, the embracing of the bones. The bones were not the ancestor. The bones were the shadow or the footprint in this reality of the ancestor who is now in the spirit world waiting to be reborn. Now, not only humans do this, but higher animals and mammals such as African elephants do it. African elephants have rituals where they go and they fondle and embrace and remember their ancestors. This is why the royal families of Europe are obsessed with killing African elephants. Well, we know because they're essentially Prussian inbreds who were infected by a jinn called Oberon when they became obsessed with the Holy Land during the Four Crusades. And when they kill African elephants, the British royals and so on, they're symbolically continuing the murder of European pagans. They're killing pagans. They've always killed pagans. Anywhere there's a pagan in the world, the infected Middle Eastern Christians will seek to destroy it and wipe it out. And so that's it. That was the difference between ancestor worship and death cults. Ancestor worship is about the regeneration of the ancestors in new life as part of the cycle of life. Death cults is the veneration of the dead bodies and parts and rotting flesh of the Christian saints.